Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad that you're here. Glad to be with you. Sorry, my background is not as festive as Amanda's. Um, I uh, I find that with this particular haircut, the computer doesn't sometimes know where my head ends, and so when I use the Zoom backgrounds, I kind of disappear. And so I keep it real. But my wife kicked me out of our house today because she finds it annoying when everybody has to be quiet when I'm teaching virtually. So I had to come to my office, and it's just not quite so aesthetic back here. It's great on the sides, but you of course can't see that. But anyway, my name's Josh Dalton. I appreciate the it's another nice thing about having the cameras on, but not nice about us not being in person is you can't hear the chuckles, and so I appreciate the feedback there. Anyway, I taught high school English actually for almost 20 years. Um, I don't know, 6 or so years into my teaching career, my principal said he wanted me to teach government, and that meant also learning some economics. And I fell in love with it. And I taught economics taught government and then government and economics for the rest of my time as a high school teacher. And fell so much in love with it that I went and got a master's in economics and entrepreneurship for educators at the University of Delaware. And liked that so much, I decided I wanted to start teaching at the collegiate level and go get a PhD. So I got a PhD in economic education, also from the University of Delaware. And now I am a assistant teaching professor at the University of Tennessee. I teach macroeconomics and also teach a class uh, fittingly, considering today's topic, on markets, ethics, and capitalism. Um, Economic thought, or the history of economic thought, is not a research area of mine, but it's one of my, I guess you could call it one of my economics hobbies. And so this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and excited to walk through it with you all today. So yeah, I live in Knoxville now, and lived for most of my life in Tucson, Arizona. And then when I was working on my PhD, we lived in southeastern Pennsylvania. I have 3 daughters, and one lives in Tucson, and others live with us. And I have twins, or the youngest ones are twins, and Amanda has twins as well. So those of you know her, and yeah. So I think that's most of what you would need to know in order for us to make some connections. But anyway, excited to be here. I love talking about this topic, and hoping that you get a lot out of this day, because I remember when I was a high school teacher, just how precious a Saturday was. So we're honored that you're spending 5 hours of it with us. Along that line, though, I will very quickly say, kind of to dovetail into what Debbie said, like we, I am a piece of human capital, and that some people find that dehumanizing. I actually find that incredibly humanizing. Um, uh, Being a piece of capital, I am capable of being productive, and as are all of you. We are human resources, and it to not make use of this opportunity means that I have misallocated my time, and Amanda has misallocated her time, and Debbie has misallocated her time, and FTE has misallocated these resources, and you are misallocating yourself. So, I mean, there's no way for us to know, but we would really appreciate it. If you're not, while we're working through these sessions, that you not be, shopping for pet beds and scrolling through Etsy or anything like that. And I mean, I saw Varun slap his head. It happens. I mean, I did his session in person and was walking around the room, and people are just like buying dog food and on pets.com doing stuff. I know that teachers are sometimes as bad as students. So we just ask that you lock in. I know that Amanda and I work very hard to make these worthwhile, especially since it isn't virtual, and it's it's a little bit tougher to make connections, and it maybe doesn't feel quite so as enlivening as when you're in person. But we work very hard to present something special for you all, and so we ask that in response that you honor our time and honor your own time by staying focused with us. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to either Amanda or Debbie, or before we start session one.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Great introduction. Josh and I have so many things in common aside from our love of econ ed. Our twins of course, are one of them that we always bond over. So it's always a pleasure to get to work with Josh. He's fantastic. If you guys don't know that already, I know that you'll see it today. So let's just take a couple of minutes to get to know who you guys are. I put a link in the chat for you guys for our PearDeck for this morning. We'll continue to kind of come back to this. I'll put the link in there one more time and then share my screen so that we can get to know you guys a little bit better. And as you guys are participating, which we certainly appreciate, we'll go ahead and start. So welcome to Is Capitalism Good for the Poor? I'm Amanda Stiglbauer, and we have with us Josh as well. Take your PearDeck pointers and show us where you're from today. So I see some of you have already put this in the chat. Thank you guys very much, but drag your icon. Should be a purple icon. Drag it on the map. Show us where you're from today. I'll go ahead and show we have a lot of responses already. Oh, look at this. We are really from all over. I'm really happy to see some people from the central part of the United States here. A lot of times we get the East Coast and the West Coast and not a lot from the middle. So this is fantastic.
Amen. Who are our Arizonans? And where are you coming in from? That looks, I can't quite tell whether that's Tucson and Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm from Phoenix, Mesa.
Mesa, all right.
Suburb of Phoenix.
Yeah. I have family in Tempe, and being from Tucson, I'm at least moderately familiar with all that geography
But I was born in Tucson, so yes, native Arizona.
and stuff.
Cool. I see a few of you close to me, North Carolina. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, I'm glad that no matter where you are, that's one of the beautiful things about virtual workshops is that it really allows us to come together no matter where we are. So happy that you guys are here. And as Josh said, taking your Saturday as an educator is a pretty big ask. So we hope that you guys will gain a lot from this. So next, what grades and courses do you teach? What are you teaching? So this semester, I am teaching a section of AP Macro. I say a section, but I have virtual learners this year. So I have 106 AP Macro students and about 86 AP Human Geography students this semester. Let's see what you guys have. Wonderful. Okay, I love when we have a wide variety of teachers here as well. So we have some middle school, personal finance, economics, of course, psychology, economic survey. Cool.
Oh, looks like we got somebody else from the collegiate level or junior college, 1 and 2.
Who are our junior college folks?
I'm actually at a state college. This is Bob.
Oh, cool.
Varun, I teach at Wharton County Junior
Okay.
College, and 20% of my job is dual credit.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Very good. Varun from Wharton. We can't escape you.
I hope you're not trying too hard, Amanda.
Oh, never. I saw you pop in and I was like, yay, Varun is here. Virtual hugs, Varun. Okay, yeah, we have lots
I love the person who said, according to my students, mostly D's and F's. That's great.
Mostly.
I had a student yesterday tell me that I do on every Friday I do little feedback surveys called 1-minute papers, and I had a student yesterday tell me that I should go to another professor's class and learn from them. Yeah, because I'm just apparently not doing a good job to her. So anyway, lots of fun there.
That's a great way to start your weekend, Josh.
It's fine. She just doesn't, it's just a style thing. She doesn't like my style. This other prof stands at the podium and I move all around, and I think that just drives her nuts.
That's no fun. Well, it looks like we have a huge variety, which is great. I think that certainly this workshop will be something that you guys can all take something from. whether it's to use in your classrooms or just for your general knowledge. So hopefully that is the case. And last question before we dive into our first lecture part, why are you here? Or what do you hope to get out of today's workshop? Why did you give up your Saturday to be with us? Guess that could lead us into some great conversations about opportunity costs. I will probably have a husband who is sending me live updates from the softball tournament I'm missing this morning. My daughter recently broke out of her batting drought, so I got a nice video of her first hit this morning. Topic looked fun. I agree. Hopefully you guys will learn a lot of things to take back to your students. Yeah, some of us, it's like getting those graduate credits for sure. We're learning new things because maybe we're teaching some of this content for the first time. Why socialism doesn't always work. And I don't know if any of you are like part of the book club this term, but there's a great book that we're reading right now called Socialism Sucks. It's a survey of two professors who walk through different socialist countries, kind of take a field trip through them. So their stories are fun if you can ignore their party language. I think it makes it a little more interesting actually, but it's pretty great. Even if you're not part of the book club, pick up that book. I think it's like $20 on Amazon. It's an easy read. Networking with other teachers. That's one of the things that FTE is really good at, as you guys probably have seen if you've been to one or more of these, probably see some of the same faces and names. I think that's a testament to what we do as well. We always find something applicable and engaging. Hopefully you guys will find, even through the virtual setting, we have lots of engaging ways to help students and teachers. And I'm so excited, especially since you guys have a treat with Josh as a former English teacher as well, that many of you are also English teachers and are incorporating economic concepts in your classes. So thanks, guys, for sharing why you're here. Hopefully you will get all that you're looking for and more out of today's workshop. And just a couple of little reminders. Debbie talked about some of the logistics. We also, on our agenda for this morning, will dive right into thinking like an economist with Josh. And then I'll guide you guys through a couple of activities after his first talk of the morning. Probably one of the most important things for you guys is when we have lunch. Lunch will be around 1:55 Eastern time. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. We'll have a couple of breaks here and there, but hopefully our talks and our activities will keep you guys engaged. So it seems like the afternoon will fly by for us. And with that, I'll hand it over to Josh.
I know I've seen, like, we've seen some familiar names, some familiar faces. You are going to see some overlap between this and, if you've done economics for leaders, maybe if you've done realities of socialism, you'll see some places where there's some connections, but certainly not all of it. And we, of course, we're going to try and make sure that there are some differences, so that you don't feel like you're just getting something you've already had. So
If you guys will check your audio to make sure you're muted. I'm trying to find the person, but I
Christina.
can't.
It's Christina.
Oh,
Christina.
okay. Thanks.
okay, all right, cool. There we go. All right, so we're going to start off today with a question. And actually, before I even ask that, I'm just going to say, so I teach this class called Markets, Ethics, and Capitalism here at UT, and I try to avoid the word capitalism because it has so many negative connotations, and because it's such a suitcase word. Like, a suitcase word is a word that people put a lot of baggage into, and that every person's definition of capitalism is going to be different. And we'll actually look at a couple different definitions of capitalism and how completely and totally divergent they are. So rather than thinking about is capitalism good for the poor? I want to start off with a different question. I mean, we'll answer that one, kind of, depending on the definition. But I want to start off with a slightly different question, which is, how do you solve the problem of human want? Because this is the question that drives me as an economist. It's one of the questions that drove me or drew me into the loving arms of economics. Because I mean, anybody who has a sense of compassion is going to be motivated by this question and is going to want to, if there are answers to it, will want to find those answers, right? So, I mean, and I think any of us, very few of us are going to look at a picture like this and not feel at least some degree of sympathy. And I mean, the point of the image is to be critical of capitalism. When you see somebody sleeping on the street and they're separated from warmth and comfort by a pane of glass, that seems like it's easy to look at that and feel like something has gone wrong. So, and it's easy to look at that happening in a capitalist or market economy and think the economy has failed this person. Capitalism has failed this person. Capitalism leaves people behind. It's not good for the poor. Markets are not good for the poor. And so this is, we want to think about these questions. But as an economist, my way of approaching these questions is going to be very different from the average person. And most of you teach econ, so you know this, right? And I'm not going to answer this question the same way other people would. There's an economist who's had a big influence on me. He's no longer with us. His name's Paul Hain. And he argues that these kinds of outcomes are not moral problems, they're economic problems. And just by saying, oh my gosh, there's something morally wrong here, that doesn't actually accomplish anything. And so we want to start off with is just these things that economists agree on, these foundations that help us as economists and help non-economists see how economists look at the world. So as divergent as economists' opinions are on policy, there are some things that the vast majority of us would agree on, and these are the things that I'm about to walk through with you. So first, we're starting off today with just the economic way of thinking. So the economic way of thinking, we'll start off just with, we're going to have 5 economic reasoning propositions. Like I said, I'm here at the office. I would have no fear about any of my colleagues hearing what I'm about to say. Now, I should also, though, very quickly point out, all the views expressed herein are the views of Josh Dalton. Personally, they are not the views of the University of Tennessee and the University of Tennessee system. So just to be aware, make sure that you understand that these are all me. But I don't think any of my colleagues would disagree with this. So first, people choose, and individual choices are the source of social outcomes. So we face scarcity. Scarcity is not a myth. Even that idea is one that is controversial to some people, not to economists. So we face scarcity, which means we have to choose. And when we make choices, social outcomes develop or arise and emerge from all the choices that individuals make. And so when we see an outcome that we don't like, or something we feel like is either is wrong or unpleasant in some way, that outcome is the result of human choice. So we want to think, okay, so we want to look at, okay, what are the choices? What is the web of incentives that has led us to this point? Because that's where you're going to need to look if you want to change outcomes. What are the choices that are people making, and what are the impeti for those choices? So along that line, choices impose costs. So when you make a choice, you incur a cost. And the cost of that choice is either the next best alternative, or it's the choice that you didn't make. I mean, just even by choosing something, we refuse something. Choosing is refusing. And when we make choices, we impose costs along that line. I would encourage you, especially as teachers, communicate to your students that costs are attached to choices, not things. And then I find that confusing. And then I think, yeah, but the price tag's right there. Yeah, but they don't incur that price unless they make the choice to purchase the item. Costs are attached to choices, not things. All right, so what influences our decision making? Well, often the incentives that we face. And people respond to incentives in predictable ways. I find that this is something, this idea was revolutionary to me when I first started falling in love with econ. And it's an idea that a lot of people don't think about. I think politically, both, right, left, center, a lot of times people don't think about the fact that people respond to incentives and they respond to them in predictable ways. And if you change incentives, you are going to change behavior, and sometimes not in the way that you want. So those incentive structures, we can loosely call institutions. And institutions are the rules of the game that influence people's choices. And these can be both formal and informal. When I'm in class, I talk about this with my students. And when I do this with the FL students over the summer, we talk about the informal and formal rules. I'm sure that there are things that you can think of at your school that, there are certainly written codified rules, but then there are others that everybody knows, just like, oh, that's just a thing you don't do, or that's a thing that you absolutely do. And so all of these are, but all those are institutions, informal, formal, but institutions set out the rules of the game, and the rules of the game influence people's choices. And the last one is one that is near and dear to me as an academic economist, is that the fact that understanding based on knowledge and evidence imparts value to opinions. Evidence matters, data matters, and accuracy matters. And we can't just say things that are factually inaccurate, and just, feelings are not evidence, right? And having a strong feeling is not a substitute for sound examination, sound analysis of that thing. And this is another one that seems to transcend ideological barriers. I mean, we saw this. I think you can think of having the fact that we saw this a lot during COVID. Like it seemed like one side was saying trust the science, and the other side was saying facts don't care about your feelings. Okay, well, those are you're basically saying the same thing. So which is it? Well, the fact is it's complicated, right? And sometimes there aren't easy answers to things, and the answers are complex, and sometimes evidence isn't entirely, it can be interpreted in various ways. And how do we know? Well, we keep running studies, we keep running experiments, we try to refine our data, and we try to come to the best answer that we can. And sometimes that's an answer that doesn't leave everybody satisfied, but evidence matters. And when we make statements of opinion, we want to try to further the discussion, not end it. So some examples of some poor thinking along this line. I'll let you read that for a second. And it would be really nice if this were just a subsegment of the populace that does this. But unfortunately, elected officials who should know better do this all the time as well. And I just remember seeing some memes the morning after the one presidential debate that we had, and actually before the Biden-Trump debate, and it was humorous to me how many things were just misrepresentations of the data. And but here's the thing, like if we want to make sound decisions, we can't make the numbers up for dramatic effect. I mean, there are some policy positions that I hold, but if I'm trying to draw you into seeing that those are the right policy positions, quote unquote, right policy positions, I can't, it's sophistry if I twist data or if I make up data, and that's a problem, right? And credibility is important. And so let's just not make things up for dramatic effect. Also, it's important to keep it civil. So this is another one that I think is unfortunately accurate far too often. I'm sure you can think of, again, in rhetoric on social media, maybe in your classrooms, the ad hominem attacks of assailing someone's character because of their beliefs. This is, I encourage my students, and actually mandate for my students in that ethics class, just to completely remove "so basically you're saying" from their vocabulary. Instead, ask questions. If someone says something that you can interpret uncharitably, instead of interpreting uncharitably, ask them questions. Find out if that's indeed what they mean. And because that's part of advancing the discourse instead of shutting it down. This person has no desire to advance the discourse. They don't care about the conversation. They care about being right. So I would instead I do encourage my students. I encourage you to encourage your students to not interpret things as uncharitably as possible, but instead ask questions, engage in discourse, and that's gonna get us all farther along the road that we actually want to be on. Trying to think if I want to mention something else there, and I don't think it will. We'll just keep going because we got 2 minutes left. All right. So along that line, this is a hallmark of my approach to things as an economist, something that a friend of mine gave me when I was in high school, and it's been a hallmark really for me ever since. The recipe for perpetual ignorance is: be content with your knowledge and satisfied with your opinions. I encourage my students not to land there and to recognize that there are a whole lot of things they probably believe right now they won't believe in 5 years. And one of my favorite things as an economist is the way that it has challenged my priors and made me go, oh, I've been thinking about that all wrong this entire time. And when you're open to data and you're open to evidence and when you're willing to let your mind be changed, you actually find that a lot of times you're wrong about stuff. And sometimes people don't like being wrong. I actually have started to really embrace being wrong, and I don't mind being wrong, because I care about getting it right so much that I don't care about getting it right, if that makes sense. If I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong. And so this is another lodestar that I think for all of us as educators, and something I think there's value in teaching our students. So that's our ERPs, and that's our groundwork for the day. And just to give you a sense of how I'm going to be approaching things, and those lodestars as economists, those are the things, those are our anchors. We pretty much all agree on those. And so as we engage this analysis of whether capitalism is good for the poor, those are our starting points. And with that, I will hand it over to Amanda.
We will dive into the first activity together today, to kind of get us thinking about poverty and the world's poor. Like, what does that look like? Where are we? And let's try to start this lesson again on PearDeck. Here we go. Okay, so if you guys will either use the link that I'll drop in the chat for you. There we go. Or you can go to joinpd.com and put in the code that is here. We'll use this for some drag and drops in our activity together early this afternoon. And then we'll come back to it a little later as well. So if you guys will go ahead and get there for us. We are in our portion of the agenda where we're diving into the first activity, which is called Make Your Mark on the World. We'll utilize some breakout rooms to do this. So as you guys go into your breakout rooms, make sure you're present. Keep your mics turned on so that you can talk with each other about some of the questions that I posed to you. And then we'll come back together and talk about some of those, the results of those, and we'll then do a Kahoot on poverty. So this activity that we'll begin with is something that you can obviously use virtually using PearDeck, or if you're more of a Nearpod person, you can also use drag and drop in Nearpod as well. But this is one that we adapted for virtual use that you could also obviously use in a brick and mortar classroom by actually placing dots. We also have a version that's kind of more of a T-chart or KWL style. So whatever your preference, something that can be used with your kiddos regardless of your content. So our activity that we'll begin with in our breakout rooms, we'll look at a world map, and you'll notice that some countries aren't labeled. My AP Human Geography mind is like, oh, well, South Sudan isn't here. Just kind of roll with what you see geographically. And we have some icons here. One of the things that I want to ask you guys to do is maintain academic integrity. This is really like about jogging our thoughts, our memories, our perceptions. It's not about, I'm not awarding the person who gets the absolute correct answer with $100 gift card, right? So I really want you guys to focus on the discourse in your breakout rooms rather than can we come up with the right answer that is generated by AI in 30 seconds or less. Okay, so as you guys enter your breakout rooms, what I'd like to ask you to do is talk about, of all of the countries in the world today, which 2 countries would you claim to maybe be the 2 poorest countries in the world? After you've had some talks about that, go to the second part. Which 2 countries in the world have seen the greatest decrease in poverty rates in the last 20 years? Okay, so which countries have made tremendous progress in reducing or eliminating, especially extreme poverty within the last 20 years? And then lastly, which country, just one, has seen the greatest increase in poverty in the last 10 years? Okay, so beginning with the 2 poorest countries in the world, how would we measure that? You guys can kind of talk about what are the statistics that might be useful in measuring it. Again, try to use what's in your noodle, not necessarily something that you're Googling. Talk about this with each other. Secondly, move on to the 2 countries with the greatest decrease in poverty in the last 20 years. And then finally, use your blue drag and drop icon to locate the country with the greatest increase in poverty in the last 10 years. So before I open up your breakout rooms, what questions can I answer for you? And if you guys have any, you're welcome to unmute yourselves. I'm also checking the chat.
Do we each drag to what we think, or is there one person that does it per group?
Excellent question. So what I'd like to ask you guys to do is in your breakout rooms, just have one person drag and drop it. Yeah. Asim, okay, good question. Your stat source, don't necessarily worry about your stat source, but definitely think about the statistics that would be useful. Okay, so is it GDP per capita, for example? Okay, any other questions?
Are we all using the same slide, all the groups, or do we have?
So you guys will have your own access in PearDeck, but just as long as one person is dragging and dropping on their PearDeck screen, that is sufficient for me.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we'll open up 8 breakout rooms, and I'll give you guys until let's go until 12:32. Okay, so 12:32 with our discussions. And at 12:32, what I'm going to do is pull you guys back in, and we're going to look at your results. Okay, and remember, use your noggins, not AI. See what we can generate, and we'll talk about the sources and the statistics used to come up with these at the end. Your rooms are open. Let me know if you have any issues joining. Welcome back. Thanks for your stellar conversations. I was able to pop into most of the breakout rooms and had some really, really good thoughts. I really want to say I appreciate that you guys were just really talking it out and not relying on some hopefully some Google source or AI source to make it easy. You guys were really just talking about your knowledge And that's really what we want our students to do too, right? But it's really tempting, especially if they think that something is on the line, to just like take this smartphone out and say, well, hey, Siri, what are the poorest countries in the world, right? But then, as Asim was kind of alluding to in his question, we also have to, and here Siri is popping up with the answers as I asked her. I did not expect that. We really also have to consider our sources as well. And Josh was talking about with ERP5, we really have to look at how where our knowledge comes from. Knowledge that comes from evidence over and over has more value. And so where does that come from? So without further ado, let's take a look at where you guys landed. Looks like I have about 18 responses. Wow. Okay. So let's begin with the 2 poorest countries first. It looks like we have, some guesses over here in Latin America. I don't know, are we in Bermuda here? Russia, a lot here in sub-Saharan Africa. We still have some pieces moving around. We actually did have some on India and China as well.
Is there a way for you to share with us what you're seeing?
Oh,
Or maybe
thank you. Thank you, Tanya. I forgot that I need to also be sharing. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Hey, it's good to see you, my neighbor. Okay, can you guys see
Likewise.
the map? You guys see the dots on the map now? Okay, so this is what you guys said. So when we look at the 2 poorest countries in the world, as you guys were discussing this in your breakout rooms, what are the statistics that you thought about? How is this measured? And you guys can just unmute yourselves if you have something to share. Okay, GDP, Africa.
We talked about GDP per capita.
GDP per capita, for sure. War. Yeah, I have the YouTube link here as well. Okay.
Amanda, our group, we didn't really talk about any metrics other than we tried to think about institutions and kind of rules of the game. A couple of us are in the book club, so we tried to channel some of that, but I don't think we specifically talked about any metrics that way.
Gotcha. Hey, that's okay. For those of you who are asking about putting the link in the chat again, let me just put the join code in the chat for you guys. It's joinpd.com, and in the right corner of the screen, it's CVOVKM. Okay. Excellent question. Okay. So wonderful discussions. What would your students say? Any guesses, just like kind of off the cuff, what countries would they cite as the poorest in the world? And how would they come up with that? Okay, Mexico, somewhere. Yeah, Africa. According to them, Africa is a country. You're right. Like, continue to fight ignorance, right? We're stomping it out. But even our students who come to us in AP Human, Africa is a country. Nobody, not a country, but we'll get there, right? Okay,
Well,
social.
I said a lot of, that's what I think of because we've been prone to see the commercials about the little kids in the water on TV. So I think a lot of kids, that comes to mind when you talk about poverty in other countries.
For sure. We see the commercials and it's like what we see on TV and the commercials. And yeah, you're exactly right. And that takes us back to that economic reasoning proposition number 5. How do we get our, sorry guys, I'm struggling with a little cold here. How do we get our information? Where does that come from? And then how accurate is it, right? Okay, Afghanistan. That one is one that is kind of at the forefront of our minds because conflict, right? Yeah, absolutely. So let me show you guys the statistics that we used. So when we look at the 3 poorest countries in the world, here they are. And the information for this comes from the CIA World Factbook, probably one of my favorite tools to use with my students, no matter what class I'm teaching. Something that as like an econ and a statistics nerd, I can really like get lost in because so much information is there and it's just riveting to me. So according to the CIA World Factbook and using their guide to country comparisons, per capita GDP, the 3 lowest countries in the world are Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Burundi. Here they are. And as many of you were saying, a lot of the students would say Africa, right? Or they would place us in that geographic region of the world, and specifically sub-Saharan Africa, right? So per capita GDP, the GDP per person ranges from $1,500 per year to $900 per year. Yeah, that's extreme poverty. So when we look at that, I heard a lot of you, as I dipped into your rooms, a lot of us were talking about like Venezuela because we hear of Venezuela in the news. So a lot of times, like what we find in context comes from what we're hearing. So Venezuela, I looked up for you guys, 156. Okay, so their per capita GDP is actually a lot higher than those 3 lowest countries in the world, still at about $7,704. And then we can look at some of the highest countries in the world. Some of these, and Varun was mentioning institutions. We'll continue to talk about the importance of institutions. A lot of these have private property rights. They have rule of law that is upheld. They have entrepreneurship that is firmly intact, and they have free and functioning markets. But a lot of these also, you'll notice, are pretty small countries. Some of them are European, or maybe they have some type of resource that has helped their wealth. Oh, yeah, Leah, for sure. These obviously the estimate came from 2018. Do I think the present number is lower? Yeah. And that's one of the things that when we look at countries with very weak institutions like Venezuela, it's very difficult to draw out that data and also understand if it's actually accurate data or not. So that's one of the things that you'll find when you send your kiddos to this resource, even though I love it so much. A lot of times, you'll find some of the most recent statistics are not necessarily recent at all. Venezuela is one of those examples. Okay, that was pre-COVID. You'll find a 2017 one. And these numbers have been, updated recently, but some of them not so much. South Sudan, 2017, a lot has changed since then, right? And the economic condition of so many has changed in a negative direction since then. Okay, so there's our first one. Now let's go back and see what you guys said about the 2 countries with the greatest decrease in poverty in the last 20 years. We have a lot of green on China, India, we had some Brazil, and then we have like the United States and Canada, maybe some in the Middle East. I think this one for you guys is a little bit easier. So for the majority of us, yes, you're right. A lot of us got this 100% correct. So the next 2 statistics that we'll look at come from statistics from the World Bank, also the Development Initiatives Organization. Has stated that China and India have experienced the greatest reductions in people who are living in extreme poverty since 1991. When they created these statistics around 2017, the poverty line or the extreme poverty line was living on less than $1.90 a day. That has since been adjusted to living on less than $2.15 per day for extreme poverty. And then lastly, let's look at the country that has the greatest increase in poverty rates. This is actually Lebanon. So let's see if anyone actually guessed. Put a cursor. Oh, Looks like actually maybe one person did. Maybe they chose Lebanon. It looks like that cursor is going toward Lebanon. But that's a country that I did not hear talked about in our breakout rooms, and probably not one that our students would hear as well. So when we look at the greatest increase in poverty rates, Lebanon has actually tripled over the past 10 years. Conflict being one of those things. And for many of these countries, as I heard so many of you talking about in your breakout rooms, a lot of these countries have experienced a sharp increase in poverty rates as a result of COVID and conflict that has resulted since 2020 as well. All right, so let me check out a couple of your, and refugees, absolutely. And yeah, one of the things, and this study was taken from March of 2024 from the World Bank, but I think for certain, Liz, like probably for Lebanon in the past few weeks or months, their condition has probably worsened even more. So, yeah. All right. Well, to wrap us up, we're going to do just a little quick global poverty survey before we move into our next part of our time together. So, if you guys want to join me on Kahoot, and see if I can go ahead and start this thing. Here we go. So if you guys will join me on Kahoot.it, or you can scan the QR code pretty easily here. It's Kahoot.it, and I will copy the game pin and put it in the chat for you guys as well. All right, Kahoot.it. I don't know why my computer is making me autocorrect Kahoot. I haven't used it before. It's trying to be brand new. Yeah, really, really sad situation in Lebanon. I agree. But also, as you're talking with your students about poverty, that's also a really good segue into chatting about current events and how that affects people around the world. All right. So this is a quick Kahoot to kind of wrap us up. And just as with the slides, this is also available to you guys. If you have Kahoot, you can just easily, you can use mine or you can duplicate it and use it in your own account. But it is here and ready for you. Can't get the link to work? Sim, I think yours is auto-correcting too. I don't know what's going on with our autocorrect today. Yeah, thank you, tag team there. All right. Always love to see the emojis that my kids choose. Same with you guys. All right, so we'll go ahead and begin. If you're still joining, feel free to. That is totally fine. But for the sake of time, let's go ahead and begin. Okay, so just a few questions for you guys. First one is, since 1980, the percentage the world population living in extreme poverty has increased or decreased? Oh, really split on this. So actually, one of the huge strategic development goals of the United Nations is to decrease or eradicate those who are living in extreme poverty. So since 1980, that's actually decreased. It's decreased pretty dramatically. Now, of course, there are situations that happen throughout the world, like COVID, for example, that maybe cause an uptick. So just like the ups and downs of the business cycle, we see ups and downs in this as well. But in general, the general trend has been a sharp decline in the rates of extreme poverty. So this is good news. Okay, next one. Since 1980, has the number of people in the world living in extreme poverty increased or decreased? World population has risen. What has happened with the number of those who are extremely poor? Okay, this one has also decreased. So yes, we see a lot of these like really bad things in front of our faces in the news. And yes, like we still have a long way to go. But one of the things that we have continued to see is that even the number, not just the percentage of people living in extreme poverty has continued to decline. Okay, next question. How many of the global poor face risk of floods? Okay. Oh, great job, guys. So, as a total, about 1.4 billion people on the Earth's surface are really at high risk of floods, and about 132 million of those fall below the extreme poverty line of living on less than $1.90 a day, or for the adjusted $2.15 per day. Okay, Brianne, we see you on a roll. Okay, hopefully this is a softball. Which region has the highest rate of extreme poverty right now? And you guys got it. It was a softball. Sub-Saharan Africa, about 41% of the entire population lives on less than $1.90 a day from 2017 statistics. It's a staggering number. 3 major challenges to poverty reduction. Some of these major challenges. We really kind of hit on each of these as we were talking about the countries involved earlier. So a lot of these are challenges, but the top three are COVID-19 and still like the recovery from this, climate change, and conflict. A lot of these are things that we see in the countries around the world who have the highest poverty rates and have a hard time climbing out of that poverty trap. Okay, the percentage of the poor age 15 and older that have no schooling or only some basic education. Again, kind of drawing back to that idea of human capital and the importance of institutions. Staggering 70%. It's really hard to imagine. So this just kind of gives you guys and kids an opportunity to see like the face of this, what this looks like. Which countries will be the new poor and where are they mainly located? Okay, yeah, tough because India, a lot of these are climbing out of extreme poverty, but with India and Nigeria, we still see population growth. So that's one of the things that has led to the new poor being located in those two countries. All right, wrapping it up with our last question. The national poverty line in the United States, what is it per day versus that of Ethiopia? It's a different national poverty line based on where you are. It's kind of intriguing. Okay, so in the United States, being in extreme poverty is considered living on less than $24.50 a day. Compare that to Ethiopia, which is actually below the international extreme poverty line of $2.04 per day. So we're going to look at our podium and then we're going to take a quick break before we start back over together. Justin, Ania, I say that correctly? And Brienne, great job, guys. Let's give them a virtual round of applause. Thank you guys for participating. And we will take a little short break and let's come back together. Look back at my agenda.
We can do a 10-minute break. It calls for a 10-minute break. We can start at 1:05.
1:05? Okay.
1:05?
start at
Well,
1:05?
1:05 Eastern.
Okay,
5 after
1:05?
the hour, wherever you are.
Okay, sounds good, guys.